Hunter! Wake up! Hunter never called or anything. Both Kai and Jake woke up very quickly on my bed. He has my dog, Jake!
He has our dog, Kai, and he's my uncle. Now calm down.
Jake grabbed for his cell phone and called Hunter.
Hello? Hello? Hunter? Someone answered and then they just hung up.
He dialed again, but this time it just rang. He dialed his mother next.
Mom, listen to me.
Jake told Mama about where Hunter had gone, and she apparently was on her way.
Now y'all stay here.
Fuck that! He has my dog! Come on, Tracy. We all got into my Honda and headed for Acorn Branch. When we pulled up, I saw the same group I had met the night before, only they all had baseball bats this time. One of them grabbed a huge bolt cutter and broke the chain on the gate. Hunter's squad car was sitting out front. It was unlocked and the windows were down. Blue! Kai yelled, and we heard a loud yelping from a dog. It sounded like it was in pain. You motherfucker! If you hurt my dog, you'll have hellfire coming!
Shut up, Kai! So much for a surprise attack. Fuck!
Jake responded. I need my dog, Jake!
I know. Wait!
Kai took off, and that skinny white girl could run. Jake and the group took off after her, and I walked behind all of them. Listening to Blue's screams was horrible, and all I could think about was my brother. Did he make sounds like that when they ripped his tooth out? I watched Kai running from the back. She had run right out of her flip-flops, and I picked them up for her as I trailed behind the group. Blue had been tied very tightly to a tree. There was no space between the tree and the dog. Then all I saw was Kai drop, and she screamed a blood-curdling scream. She dropped so fast, it looked like one of those little toys they had years ago. Remember those toys where you would push on the bottom and the little figure on the top would just collapse? Well, they were called push-up button puppets. Kai had run right into a bear trap. The group circled around Kai, who was still trying to help Blue. Get her free first! Kai screamed. Jake ran up with the bolt cutters and cut the dog free. Blue immediately ran to her owner. She laid her whole body over Kai and growled menacingly at the men trying to help. It's okay, Blue. It's okay. Just get it off! Kai screamed in agony. It took two men on both sides pushing down with all their strength to free Kai from the trap. Her bone had been exposed on one side, and she was bleeding horribly. Her entire hip was facing the wrong direction. Mama ran to her. Oh my God, baby girl! You too! She screamed at two of her brothers. Get her to the hospital right the fuck now! They scooped her up and ran back to the car. I could hear her screams fading as she was being rushed away. Blue followed them. This left only me, Mama, Jake, and one of his uncles. I looked around and saw nothing but a big house and lots of trees. It was hot and humid. The sky was beginning to darken and very quickly began looking more like dusk than morning. Huge black clouds blew in from nowhere, and I heard my Honda start up. Wherever they were taking Kai, they were doing it in my car. I was now at the mercy of these people. I ran to the house and started looking in the windows. Though it was dark, I could see what looked like paint all over the place. It was splattered on the walls and ceilings. Some of it looked old, and some of it still looked wet. The house seemed to be a huge ranch-style property. Travis! I yelled as loud as I could. There was no movement in the house at all except for the flies at the windows. It felt deathly quiet. It began to rain. I had never seen rain like this. Sheets of water almost instantly soaked my entire body. The men and Mama were yelling for Hunter. Nothing. Strong winds began to blow hard and extremely fast. Branches went sailing into the air. A screen flew off the house and got caught in a tree. Jake and his uncle tried kicking in the door. It took both of them kicking with all their might about 4 times before the door flew open. Mama and I were standing behind them, and the smell hit us all right in the face. We all began gagging instantly and putting our hands over our nose. Jake lifted the bottom of his shirt to his nose. The house was very dark, and we all had our phones out with the flashlights on. It looked like someone had thrown a body covered in blood at the walls. There were also handprints smeared in what appeared to be either blood or red paint. There were also symbols painted all over the house in red. With each step I took, I felt my flip-flops squish down into the carpet. I looked down and had what looked like blood all over my toes. It was squishing up through the carpet like molasses and just as sticky. The house was very dark due to the storm, and it seemed the electricity was out. We walked into a big open room. There was a baby grand piano in the corner and a sunken living room with an enormous television on the wall. The TV screen was cracked and half hanging. Jake ran to the sink and threw up. He splashed his face with water and put the t-shirt back over his mouth. We walked the entire length of the house together, slowly. We tried flicking on lights as we walked, but none of them worked. The house had many, many rooms, and each one was painted. Literally painted. Symbols had been painted on the walls all over the house. And my grandfather was a cop. He told me once that when you smell a dead body, you'll never forget it. This was that smell, and I am terrified to find out who or what is creating it. Travis and I found a dead cat once, and I thought that was bad. This was horrific. The house smelled like rotting meat mixed with cheap old lady perfume. We found a door, and Jake opened it. We all looked down at the long staircase leading to a basement. Jake looked back at us to make sure we were still following. The tiny beam of light on his phone gave us little visibility. Jake slipped violently down the stairs, and his body made a splash at the bottom. I could see ripples in the 2 feet of liquid he had landed in. He stood up, and the small light from my phone shined on the red liquid he was covered in. I thought the basement had been flooded, and it had, but not by water. Jake finally stood up, and I could see what looked like blood dripping slowly off of him. Each step leading down to the basement was coated in the same red liquid. It was tremendously difficult for Jake to walk back up the stairs. It was in his hair and all over his face. He kept spitting and vomiting while struggling not to fall back down again. I grabbed for his hand as soon as he got close enough for me to reach him. I had it all over my hand now. Blowflies buzzed everywhere, and many ascended onto the red substance that was all over Jake.
It's definitely blood,
Jake said as he again spit onto the floor. His body heaved with nausea. He had nothing left in his stomach by this point, but he couldn't keep from gagging. We walked the entire house and went into each room. We didn't find any bodies. Just an unbelievable amount of blood, bizarre symbols, and handprints, but no bodies. The smell was so thick I could taste it. It was like having a mouthful of dirty pennies. Do these symbols and blood mean anything to anyone? Could that be Cherokee? I asked.
It's not Cherokee, Mama answered. I don't know what that is.
This is all blood, right? I asked. How much blood could possibly be in a man? If I remember right from anatomy class, a man has about a gallon of blood. Each step I took held a new squish. Every inch of the carpet seemed to be filled. There were shining areas with large pools of it, reflecting the moonlight that came from the skylights above us. They looked like little black ponds. I mean, there has to be enough blood for hundreds of people in this place, maybe thousands.
Smells like blood, and I can definitely tell you that it tastes like blood. I don't know, Tracy,
Jake answered.
It's all blood,
Mama responded. As we walked back to the front of the house, I looked up the hallway. There was a rope hanging from the ceiling, and there were flies all around it. I pointed it out to the others. Jake grabbed the rope and pulled it down. A staircase came down, just when I thought the smell couldn't get any worse. Flies came at us in droves from the attic. Jake walked up first with the flashlight on his phone. I followed him, and Jake's uncle stayed with his sister. Flies circled around my nose and mouth, and I feverishly washed my hands in front of my face. The attic was tall enough for us to stand up in. It seemed to go on the length of the home. There were storage boxes everywhere, rows and rows all labeled. I shined my phone on them. The first one said girls, aged 2 to 4. Next was boys, aged 4 to 6. It looked like someone was storing kids' clothes. There must have been over 100 of them. The boxes encircled the room, and directly in the middle, we saw 3 men sitting on their knees together. At first, I thought they had been hog-tied. Their faces pointed to the ceiling. After further inspection, we could see the leather sutures had been sewn into each man's back and then tied to their feet to keep their bodies upright and their faces pointing to the sky. The first one looked like it had been there the longest. He had on a red and black plaid t-shirt and a MAGA hat. His hands had been sewn to cover his eyes. Huge sutures connected his hands, and the rot was beginning to pull at them. His body was so bloated he looked like a balloon. The one next to him I recognized instantly, only because of his Rick and Morty t-shirt. Someone had sewn my brother's hands over his ears. His mouth was slightly open. There were trails of old dried blood coming from his ears. His body was decomposing. He barely looked human.
No!
I cried out as lightning struck directly outside. Thunder cracked and shook the house.
My baby brother! Oh my God, look what they did to you! You should have stayed with me in our little house on the hill. You couldn't help the way you were. You should have stayed with me like we always promised each other. Fuck!
I began to hyperventilate. My world was crashing down around me. The third man had blood oozing from the sutures where his hands had been sewn over his mouth. It was Hunter.
Please, God, don't tell me my brother's up there.
I heard Mama's voice calling from the bottom of the staircase.
It's bad, Mama. Don't let her come up here. He's gone, Mama.
A second later, we heard a low, gurgling sound coming from Hunter. Hunter was alive. Very violently, the staircase slammed shut. We heard Mama scream. Piano music began to play very violently. Jake dialed 911 but couldn't get a signal. The only window in the small attic was behind the bodies, and it wouldn't be big enough for any of us to get through. I looked at my phone, and I had no signal at all either. I dialed 911 anyway, but it wouldn't go through. Jake ran to Hunter. Hunter's eyes were about as big as saucers. Blood dripped from his sutures. I held my phone flashlight over Hunter's feet so Jake could cut him loose. The agony he was in was obvious. His feet had been bound with rope, and his body collapsed when Jake cut it. His muffled screams were almost as loud as the thunder. Someone in the house must have been able to reach 911. We could hear sirens coming from all directions. Jake's uncle pulled the stairs back down, and we were able to get out of there. We waited with Hunter while the EMTs came in. I could hear gagging from the men entering the house. None of it mattered anymore. There would be no one to have to protect. I could tell the police everything. A female EMT put a warm blanket around me. I sat outside on the porch. The rain had stopped, and the sun was coming out. Cops and detectives were everywhere. They took my shoes and everyone else's that had been in the house. The blood on my feet was drying and itched. I didn't want to touch it. How much of this blood was from Travis? They were pretty pissed off we had trampled all over their crime scene. I watched as they took my brother's body out in a body bag. I saw a few news vans pulling up, and there was a helicopter overhead. The cops let us go to the hospital, but we had to promise to stay there. They would interview all of us. We left in police cars, and they took us to a local hospital. Kai and Hunter were both in surgery when we got there. The 2 detectives from LAPD were also there, and they were waiting for me. The older cop spoke first.
I'm sorry about your brother, Tracy. We will need you to come and identify his body.
Okay, I answered, trying to hold back my tears.
There is a room over there we can use to talk. Can we get you anything?
Coffee, please. Just cream and sugar. They were being nice to me. It was just me now. It felt so weird. I would never have to lock it again. I was the only one left to know all of my dark secrets. Well, me and my abusers. But most of them are probably dead by now. My phone dinged that a deposit had gone into my account. The renter paid her rent, and it was on time. Well, one good thing happened today. The 2 detectives began taking out folders and putting them into piles. The older detective had on a suit, and he smelled like Old Spice. Do they still make Old Spice? I wondered. He was older, but built like a brick shithouse, like my grandfather would have said. He was tall and hunched a bit when he walked. He looked at me so differently now. There was pity for me in his eyes. The younger cop looked like he was learning from the older one. He did a lot of listening. He let the older guy finish with me before he asked anything. The questioning started with a simple, "Start from the beginning and tell us everything you know." This would be the first time I would tell my story to anyone, and a cop of all people. I started by telling them how Travis and I grew up. I wanted them to care about him in some way. I knew I would need to tell some of our stories so that I might be able to elicit some concern for finding the man or men that did this to him. I told them about the time Travis chipped his front tooth on some pedophile's belt buckle. I told them a handful of the things that happened to me. Then I told them about the time I caught my brother watching the toddler that lived across the street. My brother was 14 at the time. I stopped to take a break. "Can I have a cigarette?" I asked.
Menthol or regular. I keep both on me at all times.
The older cop offered. We're in a hospital," the younger cop protested. "Maybe there's a bench or something outside." I was sure they'd both be grateful for some fresh air. I knew I stunk of death. The smell stayed in my nose, too. We walked outside and found a few picnic tables. No one was around. I lit my cigarette and sipped my coffee while vomiting my life story to 2 male detectives. Oddly, it felt good to let it go. The cop pulled the white iPad out of his briefcase and showed me pages of conversation and the old rich dude he died next to. There were also pages and pages of child pornography. The old man had sent him thousands of videos and pictures. He had invited Travis to stay with him in his home.
The gentleman you found next to Travis, well, he owned half the town of Gatlinburg. His name was Neville Lomad. That name sound familiar?
No.
Well, he's a real big deal around here. He was the owner of the home he died in, and the one your brother came here to stay with. He sent your brother thousands of photos and videos. They exchanged quite a bit of conversation. Now, if you really read through it, Tracy, he made Gatlinburg sound like a pedophile dream. According to Neville, there are children here that love being with grown men. It's really sick, Tracy. Now I want you to listen to me.
The older cop leaned in and looked me in the eyes.
This is not your fault. I know you think you could have controlled your brother, but you couldn't, sweetheart. He would have done it no matter what you said or did. Travis wasn't the only one he invited, and all of those men are missing also. Now, I overheard you say something about a man wearing a hat. Can you tell me more about him?
I knew this would make them question my sanity. I was so grateful that I had taken the video. Well, the first time I saw him, he was walking down Ski Mountain Road. He's tall, and he wears this long trench coat and a hat. They're both made from the same material. It looks like brown leather. I told them everything that had happened, from the crow to my first visit to Acorn Branch. They both looked at each other. The younger cop paused and said, "Well, we're going to need to call someone. You know, you've been through a lot these past few days. But Tracy, if we say the word entity to anyone, well..." The 2 men walked away from me so they could speak privately. I watched them talking, and each one occasionally looked back at me. I had toyed with them long enough. Apparently, they had someone going through the old man's security footage. As I walked around the house, I saw cameras everywhere. I wish I could look at those recordings myself. I wanted to know who or what had done that to my brother. I was angry and I wanted revenge. I wanted to rip someone apart. "I have a video if you'd like to see it." Both men looked back at me in shock. My biggest concern right now was the tooth I had around my neck. I didn't want to give it to them. I wanted his tooth around my neck and the little ball filled with herbs forever. It was all I had left of him. I knew they would take it from me if I told them about it. I fished my phone out of my pocket. The light on top was red. I only had a few seconds of battery left. I tried to play the video, but the phone went dead. The younger cop ran back into the hospital and grabbed a portable charger. We sat there just staring at one another while the phone charged up. "Tell us what's on the video, Tracy." The younger cop was getting impatient. I went by myself to Acorn Branch. It was around 1 a.m. I sat there in the dark just to see the house I thought Travis might have gone to. I told him about how they had impounded Travis's car and about the sticky note. I told them how the man in the hat came to the gate and watched me. I took pictures and a video of him. The calm, older cop looked like he was losing his cool too, waiting for the phone to charge. The phone turned itself back on, and I scrolled looking for the video. They watched it and looked up at me. I had taken my eyes off of the man when I leaned over to pick up the tooth ball, but the camera was still on him. You could see the video jostle as I opened my door and leaned out. The moment I look away, a fog bank passes by as if a strong wind had just blown it through. The fog passed, and the man in the hat was gone. The two men just looked at one another. "What did he toss onto the road?" the younger cop asked. "Just a ball of paper. It said, 'Invitation accepted.' I threw it away," I answered. "Where? That paper could have his DNA on it. We need that paper, Tracy." This really upset the younger cop, and I wasn't sure he believed me. I told him I tossed it out of the window of my car while I was driving. I told them I had saved the first note and that it was back at the hotel room. We walked back into the hospital, and the two detectives walked me down to the morgue so I could identify my brother. We walked into a room, and he was on a stainless steel table with a blanket over him. We got up close, and they pulled away the blanket. His mouth was slightly open, and several of his teeth were missing, including the one I had around my neck. His face had a look of horror. I could see holes where they had removed the exceptionally large sutures. I guess someone cleaned him up a bit for me. I touched the holes. His hands were still in paper bags. They would want to dig DNA out of his nails. They left me alone for a few minutes. I touched him, and he felt so hard and cold. I noticed symbols that had been recently tattooed on him. I'd never seen them before. At first I thought they were blood vessels, but looking closer at them, they were definitely tattoos. The tattoos were of strange symbols, the same symbols I had seen all over the walls at Acorn Branch. "He didn't have these tattoos before," I said aloud so the cops could hear me. "Are you sure?" younger cop asked. "Yes. Our grandfather always thought tattoos were trashy. Travis would have never done that." We all got into their rental car and drove back to my shithole motel room. When we got into the room, they asked me to just tell them where the paper was. They didn't want me to touch it. I opened the nightstand drawer, and the note was sitting next to Gideon's Bible and the sticky note with the acorn branch on it. The younger cop picked it up with long tweezers and dropped them individually into separate plastic bags. Now I know these guys are just doing their jobs and that I am in no immediate danger, but being alone with two grown men in a hotel room was triggering my fight or flight response. I could feel myself beginning to have a panic attack. My mouth went dry. My heart began to pound so hard I thought I might have a heart attack. The light began to fade from the room as my whole body felt very heavy. When I woke up, Mama and the two detectives were standing over me.
"Oh, she's coming round. You okay, baby? You're such a strong soul. You were facing down two dead bodies and a creepy guy wearing a hat. But two grown men alone with you in a hotel room was too much. She told you two men what men have done to her. Y'all should have known better. Y'all need to learn to think of someone other than yourselves. Fucking men."
No, I'm okay. They didn't do anything. I looked up at the detectives. "It's not you. It's me," I said to them. The younger cop looked a little bit embarrassed. No, Tracy, she's right. We're sorry. Would you feel more comfortable with her here? We'd like to ask you some questions too. Anyway, Ms.
Wolf.
And your first name?
Raven.
So you are Officer Hunter Wolf's
sister.
And the older cop began.
Can you tell me why Officer Wolf went in there all alone? Now, since I've been in town, I've seen several traffic stops. Saw one the other day. They pulled over some lady about as old as Methuselah, and 2 cars pulled up. Yet Officer Wolf goes into a private residence with his camera off, I might add, at 4 in the morning with only the dog. You'd have to ask Officer Wolf. Someone ripped out his tongue, and the doctors are telling us that his brain is mush. Oh, he had suffered tremendous blood loss, and most of the bones in his body are broken. Officer Wolf has a wife and 2 daughters, detectives. Now, y'all came here looking for her brother, and you found him. Why are you still here?
This seemed to frustrate the younger cop. Now, the conversations we found on Travis's iPad matched dozens of missing persons cases all over the country. We haven't even investigated the international ones yet. That is why we are still here, Ms. Wolf. The FBI is involved now, and they're going to be sending some people out here tomorrow. This is a big web, and everything leads back to Gatlinburg and to that house on Acorn Branch. Now, from what Tracy told us, you seem to have some information about this man in the hat. Would you care to share that with us, Ms. Wolf?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you,
Raven said while lighting another cigarette. The older cop leaned in.
Now, I don't know if you can tell from my accent, but I ain't from the West Coast originally, Ms. Wolf. Now, I'd recognize that Cajun accent anywhere, Detective. Louisiana? Well, that's right. So tell me, Ms. Wolf, tell me your story. I think I can handle it. I ain't sure really what it is, but they say if you talk about him, he'll show up. Well, we've been doing a lot of talking about him, gentlemen. Some thinks he's a demon, or the devil himself. Now, I've seen him, and when I did, something bad always happened. But by the time I sees him, it's already happened. I just didn't know it yet. He tries to go after people that won't be missed. People we don't want in society anyway. Seems he understands the love of a twin sister, though, doesn't he?
The younger cop responded. From the video Tracy showed us, it looks like we're looking for a person, ma'am. This is a man waving. This is a man tossing paper onto the road. This is all very real.
Well, that's the smartest thing I heard you say since I met you, Detective,
Raven said as she blew a puff of smoke his way.
It's all very real.
The older cop stood up.
On that note, I'll just say this. I'm going to need you to stay close for a while. I want to be able to get a hold of you when I need you, Tracy. That going to be a problem?
No, I answered. I'm not going anywhere for a while. I haven't made any plans yet, but if I do, I'll call you. I'm sure the FBI is going to want to speak with both of you tomorrow, younger cop said as he was walking out the door. Make sure you keep your phones on. The detectives left us alone in my room. Raven lit a cigarette and gave it to me, then she lit one for herself. We just sat there for a few minutes.
You ready to go home yet, Tracy?
I want to understand what happened to my brother before I leave.
Well, be careful what you wish for, baby. When you invite the devil to dinner, don't be shocked when he shows up.
That's exactly what the first note I got from him said.
Really? It's the same thing I got after I sees him. If he calls himself the devil, maybe we should believe him.
I'm finding it hard to believe any of this is really happening. When did you see him the first time?
Oh, geez. I'm not sure how old I was. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and seize him. Sometimes he'd be in the corner of my room, and other times I could see his shadow walking in the hall. My mother said she saw him right after I was born, and that he stroked my head. She said he walked right up to her in a public place, got into her personal space, then he rubbed my head. I've seen him on street corners and while I was drinking alone. I never got a video of him like you did, though. If you don't care, could I see your video, baby?
You know, it's funny. In California, we say, if you don't mind. If you don't care, it sounds so weird to me. To say I don't care about something in California is very un-Californian, for lack of a better word. In California, you have to care about everything, or they'll kill you. I pulled out my phone, and she watched the video several times. She sat and stared at his photo for a long time.
This makes him so real for me. More real than ever before. You know, I feels him when he's around, even if I can't see him. He's been so close since you showed up. I wonder why. What do you think he wants from you?
I don't know. I feel so alone.
But you're not alone, baby. And I have something for you. You know, the dogs we all have here, they all come from the same bloodline. They're descendants of the first blue pit we ever had. She kept the man in the hat away somehow. Now, they're not all warriors like that. We always have hope when a litter is born. Hope that one of them might be a Saganij Dawani Danatali, or just Sage for short. It's Cherokee for Blue Warrior. Our mythology talks of the Great Mother that controls the universe. The Great Mother is always accompanied by a dog. That's why we all have them. Crow has 6 of them, and she never leaves her nest. Never. She feels safe there with her dogs, even though none of her dogs are Sages. Now, they're a good pack, don't get me wrong. She's still in one piece, after all. I rarely ever feel safe, but my dog, she really helps. Now, I'm going to give you one of Blue's daughters. Her name is Hope. When she was born, there was something very vastly different about her. She even smelled different. I had so much hope that she would grow into a warrior that I named her Hope. Now, she is an immensely powerful soul, Tracy. I knew she was meant for great things, and that she had an extremely specific destiny. I believe you are Hope's destiny, Tracy.
Mama went outside and came back with a blue pit that looked just like Kai's blue pit. Mama bent down and whispered something in Cherokee in the dog's ear, and it walked over and laid down at my feet. What did you say to her?
I told her to keep you safe. She understands. Not all of them can be strong enough to take on a demon, but this one here is. Maybe 1 in 100 puppies are born with that sort of bravery Hope has. Maybe even less than that. When Blue's mother was pregnant with her, I told Kai she could have one. She picked her dog the second she was born. I have no idea how Kai knew. Blue's one of them warrior dogs. Kai won the dang Blue Pit lottery. I still don't know how she got so lucky. There ain't nothing that dog wouldn't take on to keep Kai safe. Hope is like her mother, only she's braver.
You said demon. Do you think that's what he is?
Like I told the detectives, baby, I don't know what he really is.
I reached down and petted Hope. I had always wanted a dog, but Travis was allergic. After Mama left, the pit just sat looking up at me. We sat there staring at each other. Mama left me with a leash, 2 bowls, and some food. Her name was stitched into her thick black collar in fancy pink writing. I watched her eat, and then she ran to the door. Her tail was wagging. A second later, there was a knock at my door, and it was Jake.
Holy shit, is that Hope?
The dog wagged her tail in excitement. Blue and Hope gave each other kisses and sniffed one another. They both started glaring at the corner again. Your mom gave her to me.
You serious?
I saw a man offer my mom 10 grand for that dog once. She looked him up and down and said, You're not Hope's destiny. The elders say there's something special about her and Blue. They call him Sage. Yeah, your mom told me about that. I do feel safer with her here.
I'm going to do you the biggest favor right now. I learned this from a nurse at the hospital.
Jake had a bottle of hand sanitizer, and he put a glob in his hands. He cupped his hands together and held them over my nose and mouth. Then he told me to breathe in quickly. I did, and it burned, but the smell of death was gone. Oh my fucking God! Thank you! Right? Hey, how are Hunter and Kai?
Honestly, Hunter is, well, his tongue is gone, and he has so many broken bones the doctors can't believe he's alive. They have him in a medically induced coma. They said he has a traumatic brain injury, and that it'll take months before we'll know if he'll ever be anything close to the man he was. Kai, she'll be fine. She'll be in a cast, and she might need more surgery later, but she'll be fine. That trap mangled her pretty good. You know, I asked my mom what happened when the stairs slammed shut. She didn't know who banged on the piano, but it wasn't either of them. She said she felt another presence in the house, but she never saw it. I guess there was someone else in there with us, and it must have wanted us to know it was there. I hope you know what a cool dog she gave you. I've only known about 5 of them that ever passed the elder test. Blue passed it without any training, just like her daughter here. She's worth a chunk of change, that's for sure. I looked down at Hope, and she had one paw on my foot and was still staring at the corner along with her mother.
What is it about that damn corner?
The night I was screaming because there was a man wearing a hat in my room. He was standing in that corner. When you guys came in and turned on the light, he was just gone.
I have to tell you, Tracy, this whole thing is pretty crazy for me. I've been surrounded by this shit my whole life, but I never believed any of it. I thought it was just old crazy lady shit. Well, now I'm beginning to believe it. Well, we're going to bed. I'm exhausted. I'm sure you are too. You can sleep with Hope here. She won't let anything get near you.
Jake and Blue went back to their room and left me alone with Hope. I smiled a huge smile and wrapped my arms around her. She sure had the right name for me. I hope this will end. I hope to take her home to my little house on the hill. She's given me hope. Hope that I will not have to be alone. I'll have her, if nothing else. I showered for an exceedingly long time, trying to get the smell of death out of my hair. I put my clothes into a plastic bag and put on a long nightshirt. I laid down on my bed, and Hope jumped up with me. She put her paw across my chest and cuddled up as much as she could. I could hear the bugs chirping loudly, and I knew, for this moment, I was safe. At least I felt safe for the first time in weeks. I slept all night and woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. Hello? Good morning, Tracy. This is Detective Young. My partner and I talked to you yesterday. I had to chuckle a bit. Younger cop's name was Young. Yeah, I remember you guys. A member of the FBI will be here later this afternoon. We've gone through a ton of the videos and the autopsies have been completed.
We need you to come down here. Do you need me to send a car?"
"No," I answered. I have my own car here, and I'll meet you at the Gatlinburg police station." I got ready and drove down there with Hope. If they wanted to talk to me, they would have to do it while my dog was with me. I wanted my dog next to me from here on out. I could deliver weed with her in the car. That's what me and Travis did back home to make a living. It was easy, and we could listen to music while we were doing it. We used to do all the deliveries together. And now I have Hope. We drove back to the tiny station. I put her leash on her, though she didn't need it. She stayed right by my side. We walked in, and the secretary greeted us. "Can I help you?" My name is Tracy Thomas." "Oh, yes. Well, come on in, baby. They're all waiting for you." She didn't say anything about my dog, so I just walked in with her. As I rounded the corner, a woman met me.
"Hi, Tracy. My name is Zydeco Benoit. I'm a special agent with the FBI. And who is this?"
"Her name is Hope, and I want to keep her with me while we talk. We can talk outside if you need to."
No. I'm glad she's here for you. I work with sexual crimes, and I also work with ritualistic murders. Well, this case has both. I'm hoping we can help each other."
Benoit is a tall woman. She towered over me. She looked like she was half African American. She had exceptionally light eyes that almost looked gold. Her hair was pulled back. She looked to be about 30 and in incredibly good shape. Benoit was attractive. She had an accent, a little similar to the older detective from LAPD. We sat down in a room that had a TV set up. She put a laptop on the table, and then she turned to me. "Tracy, I've been going through your file, but I really want to understand everything. Now, let's start with how you and your brother grew up. I'm going to record our conversation." Benoit sat a small handheld recorder on the table in front of me and turned it on.
"Tell me a little about that."
"Well, we grew up in Los Angeles. We always lived with our grandparents. My mom lived there too until we were 18. My grandparents were really old. I always remember them being old. They died after she moved out. First my grandfather, and then my grandmother 3 weeks later. They left Travis and I the house, and we kicked Mom out. We had a small house, and my grandparents spent most of their life in their rooms. My grandparents liked to stay out of it when my mom was around. She would bring all kinds of people over to the house. She was a junkie, and they were her friends. Men would come over with her and pick out me or Travis."
"You say they picked out you or Travis?"
"Yeah, they never took us when we were together."
"And how old were you when this started?"
"Oh, I have no idea. We were little. Under 5, I'm guessing. I don't remember a time it didn't happen."
"And how often?"
"Oh, all the time."
"So, weekly, maybe monthly?"
"At least 4 or 5 times a week." She stopped writing abruptly and looked up at me with a look of shock and pity.
"Let me ask you a question, Tracy. I want to apologize in advance for this question. Now, do you think your mother, she brought them to you? She brought those men to the house maybe just so they could molest you or Travis?"
I had never thought about that before. That would be truly evil, and it made complete sense. My mother had sold our little bodies for drugs. How convenient for her that she had a boy and a girl. "I don't know," I said to Benoit.
"And where was your mother when all of this was happening?"
"I don't know that either."
"So this never happened while you two were together?"
"No."
"So being together, it represents safety for you?"
"Yes." I felt my bottom lip beginning to quiver. Hope rested her head on my foot.
And Tracy, when did you first realize that Travis might be a pedophile?
When we were 14, I caught him watching a toddler across the street. He was touching himself and breathing heavy.
And did he ever talk to you about it?
Yes.
And what did he say?
I felt uncomfortable, and Hope noticed. She pawed my leg and looked concerned. I patted her head. I had been told to lock all those conversations. We always said, as long as we both shall live. Travis, I continued, was sexually attracted to children. He never told me if he preferred males or females. He acted like it didn't matter.
I see.
He was afraid he might do something someday.
He was afraid he might do something to a child?
Yes. He was afraid of getting into trouble. He was terrified of prison. I always told him, just stay with me and I'll make sure you don't do anything. I even made sure that we worked together so I could watch him.
You have to know, Tracy, that none of this is your fault. I don't want you to feel like you failed in any way. You kept him out of trouble for years. This would have been the first offense, and that, in and of itself, Tracy, is a small miracle. You did a really good job. You should feel really good about yourself.
Well, it sure doesn't feel like I did a good job. Last time I saw him, he didn't look so good.
You're a survivor, Tracy. Remember that.
We've been going through the videos and tapes from the house on Acorn Branch, and I wanted to show you some of this. She opened the laptop and put the video on the TV for me. The first one I saw was from one of the cameras from the Acorn Branch address. It was from the first time I visited the house where my brother was found. I could see my car pull up. I watched myself turn the car to face the gate. For the next several minutes, everything was fine, and then the video became very wavy, like it was experiencing interference. The next frame I could see, I was gone. All the frames that had the man in the hat on it were gone. The same was true for the cameras inside the home. 1 minute everything looks fine, and the next there's blood all over the walls.
Tracy, had you been in this house on Acorn Branch before the day you found your brother?
No.
Had Travis ever mentioned him before or anything like that?
No. He told me that he was coming here to meet with someone who understood him. He didn't give me any other details.
Well, I'll tell you this. That old man had a vast collection of child pornography on his computers. He had pictures and movies that had all been shot from inside the house. That's what was in all those boxes in the attic. He must have been actively making child pornography for years. We have hours of recordings from inside, including this one of Travis walking around the house and knocking on the doors. And the old man, he was dead by the time Travis got to the house. Your brother could see the blood on the walls and from outside, and yet he goes in anyway. Here he opens the window and crawls inside. We have him on tape walking around the house for almost an hour before the camera stopped working again. We have an IT guy back there that's been going through all of this frame by frame. But we only have one frame where you can see this man. You can only make out the profile, but as you see, he's wearing a hat. Do you have any idea who that is, Tracy?
No.
Well, I was reading through the file, and it says that you were at the scene of an accident. An accident where the police car drove off the road to avoid something.
That night you told the officers that you hadn't seen anything but woke up when the crash happened. Later, you told the detectives from LAPD that you had seen a man walking down the mountain wearing a hat. The officer stated that he saw a little girl. Can you clarify this for me? Yeah, I heard the cop say he had seen a little girl. I didn't know why he would lie about it, but I figured I'd just stay out of it. I didn't think it was going to be so important. Did Travis ever take an interest in any other languages or Satanism, anything like that? No, he watched the Discovery Channel and stuff. Travis believed in Bigfoot, for God's sake. We watched the ghost shows, but he never researched anything or studied anything. He played video games and he smoked weed. Did your brother believe in God? Well, we weren't raised religious. If something bad happened to someone, my grandfather would say a prayer for them. That was about as close to religious as we got. Well, we were able to lift some prints from the note that you gave the detectives, and this is what we found. The TV flipped to a fingerprint. It was the strangest fingerprint image I had ever seen. It looked like the tattoos that were on Travis. Benoit had already noticed the resemblance. Now, Tracy, if this is what his fingerprints look like, then we figure he must have had this done somewhere, or he's wearing some very odd gloves. Now, our team is doing research on fingerprint tattoos right now. Now, I've personally never seen anything that could alter fingerprints in this way. The same tattoos were found on all three of the men we took out of the attic and on the walls. None of this makes any sense. We found that the old man did invite Travis and some other men to his home. There were also invitations sent after his death. Of the ones we've been able to track down, seems they're all missing. Do you know what the symbols might mean? I asked.
Well, not yet, but we do know what language that is.
So it is a language?
Yes, it's called Enochian or demon speak. Apparently, it's really hard to learn and complex. Our research people are attempting to translate it now. He doesn't just know the language, but his fingerprints have the Enochian alphabet embedded into him, almost as if it was his prints.
What did he do to my brother?
This may be hard for you to hear. Are you sure?
I nodded my head and reached down to touch Hope, who was looking up at me and listening to everything.
I don't know if you are familiar with the wise monkeys.
Yeah, I know what they are. My grandfather had a bronze statue that sat beside his chair. In my grandfather's statue there were 4 monkeys, but I recognized the symbolism.
Well, you're a smart woman. Okay, so the old man had his hands covering his eyes,
and both his eyes were missing. Most of the bones in his body had been broken, and he had been drained of most of the blood. Now, your brother had his eardrums punctured. Travis had the same injuries as the other men, but his eyes were not removed. Now, the coroner says that most damage was done before death. He tortured these men for hours, Tracy. His bizarre fingerprints are all over the house. He touched everything. We've sent the DNA, but that will take weeks. Yeah, give me just a minute, Tracy.
Benoit left the room. My heart sunk with each thing that she said. My brother had been tortured. Hope began to growl at the door. It opened slightly and a man poked his face in. Hope continued to growl, and a minute later, the cop from the car accident was in my room. "Hey, Tracy," he said, and Hope kept a low growl. He sat across from me. Should I be afraid of that dog?" "Hush now," I patted her sides, and she stopped growling. Now, I know you was there the night I crashed. He was a younger cop, and he looked nervous, like he knew he didn't have much time. He kept looking at the door. He had an odd smell to him, like he needed to shower. LAPD said you saw a man walking down the road that night. He twitched while he was talking to me, his eyes especially. Can I see the video you took at Acorn Branch? I took out my phone and played the video for him. When the man in the hat showed up, he looked startled. What do you see in that video, ma'am? A creepy man wearing a hat? Why? What do you see? The door opened again, and it was Benoit, and she looked annoyed. Excuse me, officer. Sorry, I came in to see if y'all needed anything. You need anything, Tracy? Anything at all? Now, I think I saw a Starbucks in town. Starbucks mocha would be good for me. How about you, Tracy? Oh, just a coffee, please. Cream and sugar. You heard the lady, officer. You got a Starbucks here, right? Yes, ma'am. He walked out the door while keeping an eye on me. After he left, Hope seemed calmer. Did he ask you anything, Tracy? He wanted to see the video of the man in the hat that I took at Acorn Branch. And did you show it to him? Well, yes. And then he asked me what I saw. He pointed to the man at the gate and asked me what I saw. I told him a creepy man wearing a hat. I asked him what he saw, and then you came in. He didn't have time to answer.
Well, that is interesting, isn't it?
I gave her permission to go through all of our phone records. I gave her everything she wanted, including my own DNA. After what seemed to take all day, Hope and I went back to our shithole motel. I showered again, but I could still smell dead bodies in my hair. I figured it was probably my own imagination by this point, but I kept smelling it anyway. I laid down on the bed, and Hope immediately laid down next to me. The connection I felt from her was unbelievable. It was like she just knew how I was feeling and the right thing to do all the time. It felt so good to have her with me. She lifted her head and barked, a little. No growl, but a good bark. I was learning what her sounds meant. Then there was a knock at the door. I looked out and saw Mama standing there. I opened the door, and she came in, petting Hope. I came over to see how she's doing. She is amazing. I can't thank you enough. You giving me Hope was the best thing anyone's ever done for me. She went with me today to talk to the FBI and everything.
Yeah, I knew she has a special destiny. I must admit, I didn't come over just to talk about Hope, though. I am happy she's settling in with you and all, but I did some research into your family, Tracy. You are Cherokee, and I found your line.
Really? I have no idea why this made me so happy. My grandma had been so proud of her Cherokee heritage. I'm sure that had something to do with it. So what did you find? I asked Raven.
Well, you know my last name is Wolf. That's because my great-grandfather was the head of the Wolf clan. My strong Tracy, you are from the Wolf clan, too.
She took some papers and pictures out of her bag.
Now, this here's your fifth grandfather and grandmother. His father was the head of the Wolf clan. His daughter was a Cherokee princess named Snowbird. She was from the Snowbird Mountains in Texas. Now, Snowbird began her own line and came here to Cherokee, North Carolina. Snowbird's line is known as the Sauganae-Galehi tribe. That translates to the Blue Dog tribe. Now, your fifth great-grandmother was her line's matriarch. Like all strong Cherokee matriarchs, she oversaw her people with a dog by her side. A blue dog, in our case. Now, I believe you need Hope as much as she needs to be with you. I've never known a stronger sage.
I hesitated a tiny bit before bringing her to you. I hesitated out of my own selfishness. I love her tremendously, and I will miss her. The moment the thought crossed my mind, I heard my mother yell out from the other room, "You take that dog to her owner right now, Raven Wolf." Something tells me you're always going to need one next to you, baby. As far as we are concerned, you have come home, Tracy Thomas. You're one of us, and an important one at that.
I looked carefully at the pictures she handed me, and the names sounded familiar. My grandmother had mentioned these names to me. I felt a deep longing to tell Travis about all of this. He would have loved it. He loved it when our grandma would tell us the old stories of the family. I never paid too much attention.
Looks like the man in the hat posed 'em like the wise monkeys.
My grandfather's grandfather had bronze sculptures of the wise monkeys. There were 4 of them in his statue, though.
You understand what the 4th monkey means?
My grandfather told me it represented those who can help but don't.
Yeah, you're right. The hottest places in hell are saved for those who knew better but did nothing.
Favorite quote of mine. But that's not us, is it, Tracy? We spend our lives trying to keep control of the other's inner demons. You should never be without a dog, Tracy.
This was something I could really agree with. Hope had given me new confidence. I trusted her, and she seemed to know she was mine.
These dogs are in our blood. We need 'em, and they need us. Do you think there will be another monkey?
I don't know. The FBI lady told me that there's a bunch of missing people. They're all tied in one way or another to the Acorn Branch address. The old man invited pedophiles from all over the world here. There might be another monkey already. Thing is, some of them were invited after the old man was dead. Who do you think invited him, Raven?
I think you know who invited 'em. We both do. On that night, I will bid you two a good night. Walk me to my car, baby. I have something for Hope.
Hope and I walked her to her car. Mama pulled a dog vest out of her car that said service animal on the side of it. She showed me how to put it on her.
She can go anywhere now with you.
The FBI woman told me what those symbols are. She said it's demon speak or something called Enochian.
That's another name for demon speak. It's also the language of the angels. Problem is, Tracy, they're treating this like a manhunt. Their brains cannot fathom that of which they do not understand. They're searching for a man, but I don't think this thing is human.
It was beginning to get dark, and the bug-frog song had started again. I needed to find out what made that noise. Mama pulled away, and we watched her go. I went to bed and slept with hope all night. Nothing woke me till the morning when Benoit called.